To escape the curse of Galatians, the apologist must discredit Paul. But the only Christianity the first witness knew was Paul's. The move that saves one part of the story destroys another. This is the capstone of the series, and the trap that closes every exit. Over 3 films, we have followed a single moment, the founding of Islam at the Cave of Hira, and watched a series of doors close. The woman whose judgment founded the religion could not, by its own law, be a full witness. The first human to call Muhammad a prophet stood outside the religion he named, and that man's own Bible carried a curse for the very angel he endorsed. To each of these, the defender of the tradition has one last reply, a single move that promises to reopen every door at once. It is the most important move in all of Islamic apologetics. And it is a trap, not ours, theirs. A trap the defense lays for itself. If you are arriving here first, a brief map of the ground we have covered. Each film raised one problem from inside the tradition's own sources. The first, Khadijah. Sahih al-Bukhari records Muhammad teaching that a woman's intellect is deficient and that her testimony is worth half a man's. Yet the same collection records that Khadijah's judgment steadied him at the founding moment, and the tradition calls her the first believer. Her single witness was sufficient to found a faith, and insufficient by that faith's own law to testify in its courts. The second, Waraqa. At the cave, neither Allah nor the angel pronounced Muhammad a prophet. The first human being to do so was Khadijah's cousin, Waraqa ibn Nawfal, a Christian scholar of scripture who recognized Muhammad by the pattern of Moses and who never became a Muslim. The third, the anathema. The Bible Waraqa studied contains Galatians 1:8, a curse on any angel from heaven who brings a gospel contrary to the apostolic one. The Qur'an, delivered by an angel, contradicts that gospel on the cross, the divinity of Christ, and the Trinity. Read plainly, the verse falls on the angel Waraqa endorsed. 3 problems. And against all 3, the defender reaches for a single tool. For centuries, Islamic apologetics has carried a standard explanation for why Christianity does not match the Quran's portrait of Jesus. The explanation is this: Paul corrupted it. The argument is widespread and old. It runs roughly so. Jesus, it says, preached pure monotheism in submission to God. He never claimed divinity. After him, the Apostle Paul, who never met the living Jesus, reshaped the message, introducing the divine Christ, the atoning death, the setting aside of the law. What the world now calls Christianity, on this view, is not the religion of Jesus. It is the religion of Paul. Now notice why this move is needed, how much work it does across the tradition's defenses. It explains why the Quran's Jesus differs from the New Testament's Jesus. The New Testament is Pauline, and therefore unreliable. It answers the divinity of Christ, a Pauline addition. It answers the crucifixion and the atonement, Pauline theology, not Jesus' teaching. And, crucially for us, it answers Galatians. If Paul is a corrupter, then Paul's letters are not divine scripture. And if Galatians is not scripture, then its curse upon the angel binds no one. The anathema of our third film simply dissolves. This is the single move that promises to reopen the door we closed in episode 3. To neutralize the curse, the apologist removes its author's authority. Paul is discredited, Galatians falls silent, the angel walks free. It is an elegant defense, and it is fatal to the apologist who makes it. Here is the difficulty. The Paul-corrupted Christianity move does not stand alone. It must coexist with another claim the tradition cannot give up, the claim that made our second film possible. Recall why Waraqa's word mattered. The sources do not present him as a passing relative with a hunch. They present him as a scholar of Scripture, a man who wrote out the gospel, who knew the books, who recognized Muhammad through them. His authority to identify a prophet rested entirely on his command of the Christian scriptures. But which Christian scriptures? There is only one body of Christian scripture in Waraqa's world, in the early 7th century. It is the scripture that contains Paul. The Gospels Waraqa knew came bound, in the Christian tradition of his time, with the Pauline letters. The Christianity Waraqa belonged to was Pauline Christianity. There was no other on offer. And now the two claims meet. Suppose the apologist says yes, Paul corrupted Christianity. Then the Christianity Waraqa knew, studied, and wrote out was the corrupted kind. The framework he used to recognize Muhammad came from books the apologist has just declared unreliable. The very scholar the tradition needs in order to authenticate Muhammad was reading the very scripture the tradition needs to discredit. His endorsement is built on a foundation the apologist has, in the same breath, knocked away. Suppose instead the apologist says, no, Paul did not corrupt Christianity. Then Galatians stands as genuine apostolic teaching, and its curse on any angel from heaven who brings a contrary gospel falls exactly where the third film placed it. The apologist has surrendered the only tool that silences the verse. This is the trap. To answer Galatians, the apologist must discredit Paul. To keep Waraqa, the apologist must keep Paul. The defense of one dilemma is the destruction of the other. The apologist who attacks Paul loses the witness who named Muhammad. The apologist who keeps Paul keeps the curse upon Muhammad's angel. There is no position from which both can be held. There is one more exit, and it is the strongest. Stronger than anything the popular apologist usually reaches for. It belongs to the historian, not the preacher. So we will give it its full weight. The objection is this: the entire Waraqa episode, the cave, the cousin, the recognition, comes to us from Sahih al-Bukhari and the early biographies, written down generations after the events they describe. A critical historian may argue that the Waraqa scene is not bedrock history at all, but a later literary construction, a story shaped by the community to give Muhammad's calling a respected, scripture-literate Christian endorsement. On this view, our whole chain rests on a legend. We take this seriously, and we answer it in two ways. First, notice who must make this objection. To say that the Waraqa narrative is an unreliable later construction is to throw doubt on Sahih al-Bukhari, the most authoritative hadith collection in Sunni Islam, and the same collection that supplies the cave encounter itself, the first revelation, and much of what the tradition knows about Muhammad's calling. The Muslim apologist cannot discard the Waraqa scene as legend while keeping the rest of Bukhari 3 as history. They are the same hadith. The cup that holds the water Muhammad drinks is the cup that holds the water we are pointing to. Crack it for one, and you crack it for both. Second, the critic who is not a Muslim, the secular historian who doubts the whole narrative, is welcome to that position. But it is not a defense of Islam. It is a deeper skepticism that dissolves the tradition's own account of its origins. If the Waraqa scene is legend, then so is the tradition's record of how Muhammad came to be recognized at all. The defender does not want to stand here. To escape our dilemma by this door, he must abandon the historicity of his own founding narrative. So even the strongest objection forks the same way. Keep Bukhari as history, and the chain holds. Discard Bukhari as legend, and the tradition's own origin story goes with it. The skeptic's exit is not a shelter for the believer. A few narrower escapes remain. We close them in turn. Waraqa knew an earlier, pre-Pauline Christianity, but there is no record of such a Christianity in Waraqa's hands. The sources give him the gospel as his world knew it, the scripture that carried Paul. A pristine, pre-Pauline church, surviving in secret to 7th century Mecca, is not attested anywhere. To invoke it is to invent the evidence the argument needs. Some of the New Testament is preserved, and the part Waraqa used is the preserved part. This is the most tempting escape, and it is the one that finally closes the door. Because the moment the apologist admits that some of the New Testament is preserved, he owes us a principle. Which part and why? The pattern of Moses that Waraqa recognized, preserved. The curse of Galatians that falls on the angel, corrupted. On what consistent basis? None has ever been given. The line is always drawn exactly where the argument requires it, and never by any rule that could be stated in advance. That is not a principle. That is a convenience. Allah guided Waraqa to recognize Muhammad regardless of his books. Then Waraqa needed no scripture at all, and the tradition's careful emphasis on his learning, his writing of the gospel, his recognition of the namus by the pattern of Moses becomes pointless. The defense erases the very feature of the story that gave Waraqa his authority. It saves the conclusion by deleting the evidence. Each escape on inspection either invents a fact the sources do not give or destroys a fact the sources do. Step back and see the whole shape. The first dilemma worked inside Islamic law. Khadijah's witness founded the faith but could not testify within it. The second worked at the border between two religions. The first to name Muhammad a prophet stood outside Islam. The third worked inside Christian scripture. That outsider's own Bible cursed the angel he endorsed. And the fourth works on the defense itself. The move that lifts the curse destroys the witness, and the move that keeps the witness keeps the curse. Each link constrains the next. The argument travels inward, from the law to the boundary, to the scripture, to the strategy, and at every level the same founding moment refuses to hold together. Every witness in that room contradicts something the tradition needs. Khadijah by the law, Waraqa by his religion, Waraqa's Bible by its plainest verse, and the defense of any one of them by the defense of the others. This is not a chain we forge from outside. Every link was drawn from the tradition's own canon. Sahih al-Bukhari, the Qur'an, the early biographies, and the Bible that the first witness himself believed. We added nothing. We only set the sources beside one another and declined to look away. At the founding moment of Islam, there were three witnesses in the story, and a defense built long after to protect them. The law says the first should not have counted. The boundary says the second should not have been a Christian. The scripture says the second should never have blessed the angel. And the defense, when it moves to answer the scripture, takes the witness down with it. None of this proves what any person should believe. Faith is not decided by a documentary, and it is not ours to decide for anyone. But the record is the record. It can be read closely or it can be read past. We have only asked that it be read closely. The choice belongs to the believer. The chain belongs to the record. If what we share here strengthens your understanding, kindly like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Share it forward so others can find clarity and truth. It costs nothing, just a click, but your support means everything. You are part of this family.